Broadcasting live from Business Radio X. It's time for Coach the Coach.
Welcome to Coach the Coach, helping business coaches deliver more impact in less time. If you're a business coach and want to help more people make more money and own your backyard, go to brxteam.com. Lee, this is going to be a fantastic show this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming to the program with Business Solutions Consulting, Miss Sheryl Hardin. How are you?
I am doing fabulous. It's a great day. How are you?
We are doing well. Well, Sheryl, before we get too far into things, can you tell us about Business Solutions Consulting? How are you serving folks?
So Business Solutions Consulting is a change management firm, and we work with businesses that are going through a process of change because they are doing an IPO, they're doing a merger, they're doing a acquisition, or they're a fast growth startup, and everything around them is changing, and they're looking how to get the greatest benefit out of that.
So now when they're going through this change, is this something where they're like, you know, I know a change is a brewing, so I better call Sheryl before it happens? Or is it change happened and what have we gotten ourselves into? We better call Sheryl.
Well, my preference is the first option, but the second option happens too. Sometimes people feel like it's not going to be as large a change as they thought it was, and maybe we don't need anybody. And 6 months into it, they're like, why don't my employees talk to each other anymore?
So
and then they call me and say, we made a mistake.
Now, you mentioned, I think, mergers and acquisitions, that when two new companies come together is part of what you work on. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, how do you help them kind of meld the cultures? Because I would imagine that's a tricky undertaking.
Well, that is actually the trickiest part. And the first step is to understand the cultures. Often two groups will come together and they think they're very, very similar, and they're surprised at the differences. So understanding the culture of each company and each department is important so that you can bring those key players together to decide how things are going to work in the future. When you're in a fast growth process, your business is going to change. And so if you're a coach, you have to understand that that business is going to change dramatically. It's likely going to double in size, and the way people communicate is going to have to change. Where they sit and who they work for is going to change. Change is scary to people. So the first thing to do is to understand where you are today, what we can do to alleviate that fear, and what things need to look like in the future so that the culture can come together and people believe that there's someone at the helm who knows where they're going.
How important is kind of building a culture of trust in the equation here? Because a lot of people have when there's change like this, their first move is fear rather than kind of embracing and leaning into the change. It's like a fear of, how is this going to personally impact me? Am I going to get fired? Am I redundant, or am I the one that's going to stay and someone else is going to get fired? There could be a lot of casualties here. Like how do you kind of work through all those emotions where it may not have anything really to do with the work, but it's more of the emotions of the individual going through it?
Well, so that's a really great question, because that is the thing that we need to address first in any kind of major change situation. People want their business to succeed, but they want to succeed personally. And they need to be comforted in knowing that there's a path to do that. Or if there really isn't, that they have some options and they're going to be supported in their transition. So the first thing is to be transparent. If you say that no one's going to lose their job in a merger, immediately no one believes you, because it almost never works like that. if it actually is going to work like that, then you have to lay the plan out for everybody so that they can see where they're going to go next and what's going to happen to them, and they believe that they have a job. If their job is going to change significantly, we calm people down by letting them know that there's going to be training, there's going to be support, there's going to be a time of transition where we don't expect you to be an expert in this brand new job. But the key is that businesses have to have a plan. They have to know where their people will fit in the plan, and they have to let them know right away, because when you know what's going to happen, you're less afraid.
Now, when you're working with your clients, how do you help them kind of implement maybe a kind of a continual improvement? The change happens every day. There may not be a formal event of a change event, but every day the market's changing, the competition's changing. You can't assume that everything's the status quo. So how do you kind of coach your clients through, I'll say it again, leaning into a culture of change? Like, things are going to change. We have to always be changing and reinventing ourselves to a certain degree, or else we are going to be left behind.
Absolutely. And so as a coach, the most important skill you can leave a client is the ability to manage change. And I call that constant process improvement. If our businesses are not constantly improving, then we're actually losing, because the competition is improving and they're catching up to us and they're getting better than we are. And in a new age of automation, that's going to be even more true. So the key is, again, to start with where you are. Your business processes need to be clear to everybody. They need to be documented. If you're as small as a 5-person company, you need to understand what is done and why and how. That actually improves the value of your business. Once you know how you do things today, then it becomes the challenge of making sure that all of your employees are staying in compliance, and that you're looking at those processes on a semi-annual or an annual basis and saying, how can we make those better? That you're taking opportunities to say, how can I work better? How can I, as a business leader or a business owner, delegate more so that I can focus on the greater good? I encourage people to do that anytime they're having a meeting with an employee, during annual reviews, during semi-annual reviews. What are your processes like? How do they match the ones that we've documented? What would you do differently? Another time to ask that question is during turnover. The benefit of adding new people to your company is learning the skills that they've brought with them. What would they do differently? Would that make the situation better? It's important to coach people to step out of their business and take a look at how it would run if they weren't there day to day.
Now, that's an important...
What could they do better? What automation tools might they use to free employees up so that they can spend time on the greater good?
Now, that's an important lesson for leaders, right? Is to be able to delegate and give the person that's working for you the autonomy to go out and feel safe to kind of embrace this kind of change and embrace the processes and kind of take some risks, in the sense of, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. If some other industry or some competitor is doing something a little differently, we can't just ignore it. Let's explore it and see if there's ways that we can implement some of that into our system, right? To kind of
Absolutely.
Encourage this lifelong learning as part of the process.
That is so important. And so your employees will come to you with ideas, and it's important to listen to them with respect, not to dismiss them, because they may have a fabulous idea and maybe they have one that's not so workable. Every idea can't be implemented, but every idea can be respected.
And that's important, right? You want them to feel safe to share, and you can't get defensive about something they say. It's important to listen well. These are skills that good leaders have, right?
They are good skills that good leaders have. And it's important to help your employees not become static. When you're into the industry, especially an industry that is slow to change, and you've had employees that have been around for 15, 20 years, it starts to get tough for them to hear new ideas. So you want to ask them for new ideas constantly so you don't get in that stuck place.
If you're just joining us, you are listening to Coach the Coach, helping business coaches deliver more impact in less time. If you're a business coach and want to help more people make more money and own your backyard, go to brxteam.com. We've been visiting with consultant Sheryl Hardin with Business Solutions Consulting, and we've been talking about consulting to this thing called change. And I've been listening into your conversation. Sheryl, I have a question of you. I confided to you before we went on air that I had been on the periphery of some change management consulting work a long, long time ago when I had dark hair. But part of our commitment here on this show is to share ideas for having greater impact. So I have a question around this idea of impact. And I don't know, maybe it's a 2 or 3 part question. I'll just ask it and then kind of let you do your thing. But how do you personally choose to define, measure, and ensure that you're delivering impact in your work?
And so that's a very good question, because as a consultant and as a coach, we're sometimes in the business and then back out of it, and then we come back again. And one of the ways that I measure my impact is I go back to my clients 6 months or a year later and ask them, are you still implementing the changes that we developed during our time together? If they are, then fabulous. I've done my job very well. And the next question that I want to know is, how are you managing change now? Because during my time, I will have taught them to embrace change and to manage change and to evaluate whether a change would be good or bad. When I do my job well, they are still doing that. They have not gone back to the old days of pretending that change doesn't matter or that they're doing their job well today, and that means that they'll keep doing it that way for the next 20 years. Now, in the middle of a change project, the way that I measure my impact is, does the level of fear go down? Does the level of compliance go down? Can we get people excited about the change? The way we get people excited about change is to help them find ways that this change is going to make their life better. How will they be able to do their job better, easier, and in less time than they did it before? How will they be able to step up to new challenges they may have been looking for a long time? When people start to get excited about what their life is about to become, I've made the impact I want to make.
I am so glad I asked, and what I thoroughly enjoy about your response, and I'm so glad that we're not only broadcasting this, but also capturing this conversation, is you have such amazing clarity around how you choose to define, how you choose to measure, and how you choose to ensure that you're actually delivering impact. And that's got to be a lesson for any of us that have decided we want to be out there helping people. That is fantastic. I'm so glad I asked.
Well, thank you. It's a great question.
Well, Sheryl, what's your backstory? How did you get into this line of work? Were you always kind of the person that's helping other people or coaching other people?
Well, so that I have an interesting story in that I, years ago, worked for a company. I was in HR. The company happened to be a fast growth company. It was a Japanese company that had just come to the United States. And not only did I notice that the people who were coming from Japan were having a hard time making a transition, but I saw that our employees were struggling because every few months things were very, very different. We were adding 100 to 300 people every week. And I had to address those issues. As I started to address those issues and come up with ways to help integrate change into that company, I realized that was work that I had a passion for. And so, like many people in my industry, the way that I got into a change management practice was by working for a company in the midst of change, by doing the work and finding out that I loved it.
And then the rest is history. It just kept evolving from there.
It did. I actually went back to college, took some additional courses. I was able to get some clients immediately, and I've flowed from one client to the other since then.
Now, can you share a little bit so a person who's listening can understand the way that you work? Like, what's that first conversation after a person decides to work with you? What does that first call kind of look like and feel like? Are you doing it in person? Is it over the phone? How do you do that kind of onboarding or that discovery period?
So in most cases, I will do it in person. Sometimes when it's a global project, people will be spread all over the world, and so that conversation has to happen on the phone. But that's where we meet and we decide a budget. We decide on a period for developing a plan, and we come to a consensus about how things should look when we're done. The first step in any process is determining where you are now. I often have to coach people to understand the importance of that. Business leaders think they just know, and the truth is that you have to take a good, hard look at every department in every area to know where you are in order to be able to build any roadmap for the future. And so I often have to coach them into understanding the value of that process and not stepping over it to say, this is how we're going to end up, and I want to start in the middle instead of at the beginning.
And does that involve a lot of managing their expectations because they think that this is, I hired Sheryl, so then she'll just get this fixed in a couple sessions and we'll be done?
It's managing their expectations, but mostly it's in helping them understand that in any environment where change is going to happen, it's so important to understand what that change needs to look like. And that's going to evolve as you understand better where you are today and you see what you need to do to be where you need to go. The way to understand that best is to get the information from your people, because they have it and they want to share it, but they're not going to unless you ask them to.
Now, in your work,
if you don't do that first step, what happens is you've made the change. Let's say you bought a new very expensive software program, and now you're finding out it doesn't do everything that you need it to do, and you need several customizations. And you're surprised by that because you didn't ask your people, what do you need it to do?
Now, when you're doing your work, you mentioned the different kind of situations that you're involved in. Are there specific industries that are a sweet spot for you? Like you mentioned technology and these high growth companies. Do you work in certain industries and not others, or does this type of methodology kind of it's kind of industry agnostic?
It is industry agnostic. Best practices are best practices. It is the process works the same in a small company as it does a large company. I've worked with clients who are a 5-person high growth company, and I've worked with clients that have 25,000 employees. I recently did the merger between Coty Beauty and CoverGirl. Although the intricacy is more in a large company, the process is the same. When you follow the process works.
Do you have a preference? Do you like one more than the other, or it's both rewarding in their own ways?
They're both rewarding in their own way. I do have a passion for small businesses, and I really enjoy working with companies that are preparing to be high growth. But there's also a reward in going into a chaotic, large situation and calming it down and making it better for people. We spend most of our lives at work. And so if that's miserable, it eats and leaks over to every other part of your life. It's very rewarding to have people see that they have a future and they have a place, and they can come to work with a smile on their face.
Now, we ask all of our guests to share a piece of actionable advice. And in your case, since you've had so much experience working with change, is there any advice you can give a business leader when maybe it's a chaotic environment where maybe people are doing a lot of work and you're in that kind of in-between point where maybe you don't have a full-time resource available and you're doing a ton of work, and how to manage through that chaos?
Absolutely. So the first thing to do is to take a step back and make sure that you understand the processes and that the processes are working. Because when people are pointing fingers at each other, when they're upset, when they're not getting enough time to do their work, that is often seen as a people problem, but 80% of the time it's a process problem. If improving the processes is not enough, you may be at that point where you need half a new person. Maybe you're not ready and you don't have the resources for a full-time person, but you're ready, you're overloading the workers that you have. And that's a time to look and see, how can I build my staff without hiring a full-time person? Even professional people can be hired part-time. That's a great time to look for college interns. It's a great time to look for professionals who maybe want to spend more time with their kids and they only want to work 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week. To grow your staff in more creative ways than waiting until you can afford a full-time person. It's an excellent time to look at automation to see if automation can lighten the load. But those moments, when you get to chaos, it's already late. And so the sooner you step in, the better you're going to be able to help your employees come to a place where they can fully focus on their job and your company can run well.
And it all starts with the process, because the tighter you have those processes, the easier it is to delegate, right?
That is absolutely true.
Well, Sheryl, thank you so much for sharing your story today. If somebody wanted to learn more and have a more substantive conversation with you, what are the coordinates? You have a website?
I do. It's biz solutionsconsulting.com.
And what about on LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn as well?
They can reach out to me directly as Sheryl Hardin on LinkedIn. I also have a Twitter feed at Sheryl Hardin where I share these tips on a regular basis.
And that's Sheryl, Sheryl.
It is.
Well, thank you so much, Sheryl. It was great chatting with you. Appreciate you sharing your story and look forward to hearing more about your success.
Well, thank you for having me. It has been such a pleasure.
All right. This is Lee Cantor for Stone Payton. We will see you all next time on Coach the Coach Radio.